It begins with silence. Not the ordinary hush of a sleeping city, or the pause of a weary soldier's breath, but a silence that feels alive, as though it creeps beneath the skin and coils itself around the soul. On the outlying worlds of the Imperium, silence is not a gift. It is a warning. Voxcasters sputter with static, long-distance auspex arrays lose their calibration, and astropaths convulse in their chambers, clutching at their temples as if unseen talons are raking their minds raw. What words they manage to cry out before death are always the same: a shadow, vast and endless, falling across the stars. For the people who live on such a world, life continues at first. Manufacturums still grind with their monotonous rhythm. Guardsmen still march their patrols, and merchants still haggle over rations of corpse starch. But unease, it begins with the skies darker, dimmer, though no clouds linger. Nights lengthen without reason, and the constellations by which navigators chart their lives seem to fade one by one. A farmer working the soil at dawn feels it in his bones before he sees it. Something vast is approaching, too immense to comprehend, too ancient to name. The priests preach of trials sent by the emperor, urging the faithful to endure. But even the shrines feel colder, the sacred candles burning low, no matter how much tallow is poured into their flames. The air itself thickens, as though every breath must be fought for, as though the planet itself knows it is being suffocated. And above, far above, the void churns with shapes that instruments cannot measure, yet the eye cannot deny. The first glimpses of the bioships appear as flickers of shadow against the starfield, blotting out entire swaths of heaven in their passing. Within the command bastions of the Astromilitarum, alarm spreads like wildfire. Commanders pore over data slates, watching reports degrade into incoherence as patrol ships vanish into the void without so much as a distress signal. Every attempt to reach the Segmentum fleet goes unanswered. Isolation is a death sentence in the Imperium, for there is no safety in solitude, and now that sentence has been spoken. Yet on the surface, among the teeming billions, the horror takes longer to unfold. Workers notice it first in their dreams. They wake drenched in sweat, their minds echoing with whispers they cannot remember, but cannot forget. A servitor, stripped of most human instinct, halts mid-task, as if listening to something only it can hear. A child begins to scream in the middle of a crowded hab block, her voice shrill with terror at something she cannot explain. These are not coincidences. They are the tendrils of the hive mind brushing against mortal thought, probing, reaching, consuming long before the first spores fall from the sky. When the first astropath dies, shrieking, clawing bloody gouges into his own flesh, the administratum officials dismiss it as madness. But when an entire choir collapses in perfect unison, their bodies writhing in silent agony, the truth can no longer be ignored. The shadow in the warp has descended. Psychers choke on their own voices, their connection to the immaterium strangled as if by an unseen hand. No message will leave this world now. No plea for aid will reach Terra or any fleet beyond. They are alone, utterly and completely alone, and still, no enemy has set foot upon the soil. No guns have fired, no walls have fallen. This is the cruelest truth of the Tyranids. The war begins long before the first shot, long before the first beast slithers from the sky. It begins in the mind, in the crushing silence that replaces every prayer, every order, every cry for salvation. Fear ripens like a harvest, and the hive mind feeds on that too. The first to falter are always those who rely on the warp. Sanctioned psychers, even the lowest wretches dragged from prisons to fuel the black ship siege, feels the suffocation of the shadow in ways others cannot fathom. Some collapse outright, their souls burning away in flashes of pale fire that leave their bodies little more than husks. Others linger, muttering incoherently, their eyes rolling white as froth clings to their lips. The lucky ones die swiftly. The unlucky endure days of madness before their hearts simply give out. Claimed by terrors no one else can see. The Imperial Guard officers stationed on the planet try to maintain control, though their vox links are already strained to breaking. Orders arrive garbled, as though the very air chews the words before they reach their destination. Regiments are shifted here and there, patrols doubled, fortifications strengthened. But discipline only masks fear. It never erases it. In the barracks, soldiers whisper of shapes glimpsed at the edge of vision. of voices echoing through the steel corridors when no man is near. A hardened sergeant strikes down a recruit for spreading such tales, only to be found hours later, trembling in his bunk, clutching his lasgun, as though it alone can keep the shadows at bay. Civilians, too, sense the coming storm. Markets grow quieter, hab-block corridors emptier, the laughter of children rarer. Each person, whether devout or godless, feels the weight pressing on their chest. They know, in some primal corner of their being, that they are prey. Mothers cling tighter to their children, fathers toil longer at their labor, not from hope, but from desperation. As though to build one more wall, to light one more lumen, might ward off the dark that thickens around them. And above, in orbit, the void grows restless. Outposts designed to scan and monitor distant traffic flicker with warnings that their operators can scarcely believe. Whole constellations are vanishing from their scopes. Not because the stars themselves are gone, but because something vast and hungry now hangs between them and the light. Entire defense pickets simply stop transmitting. The last message from a patrol frigate is nothing more than a scream cut off mid-breath, followed by static so heavy it rattles the teeth of anyone who hears it. It is then, in the highest spires of the planetary capital, that the ruling council convenes in desperation. Governors and ecclesiarchs argue across the length of a marble chamber that feels smaller with every passing hour. Some demand prayer and penance, convinced this is the emperor's test, and that faith alone will see them through. Others call for conscription, for the arming of every able-bodied man, woman, and child. A few, their voices barely above whispers, suggest that the world is already lost and that evacuation should begin at once. None of them dare say aloud what they all suspect, that there will be no rescue, that no fleet will come, that the Imperium is too vast and too blind to see one world flickering out among its countless billions. But while the highborn wrangle and the soldiers steel themselves, the true heralds of the Tyranids make themselves known. In the wilderness beyond the cities, animals grow restless. Herds stampede for no reason, tearing across plains until they collapse from exhaustion. Packs of predators vanish from their hunting grounds, their dens left eerily silent. Even the insects change their rhythm, their chittering choruses dissolving into a kind of stillness that gnaws at the nerves. Nature itself recoils, sensing the predator that no man yet sees. Then, in the deep night, when the moons are thin and the stars should blaze, the heavens shudder. Great arcs of fire streak across the black, but they are not meteors. They are spores, countless mycetic pods launched from the silent shapes drifting beyond sight. To those who watch from the surface, it seems as though the sky itself is bleeding, weeping a rain of burning seeds that grow larger with every heartbeat. Panic breaks through restraint. Crowds flood the streets, shrieking prayers, smashing against the locked gates of shrines and the barred doors of administratum offices. The first riots erupt before a single spore has touched the ground. The shadow has fully descended, and now the world waits for its teeth. The spores do not fall all at once. They linger in the upper atmosphere. Vast clouds of organic debris circling the planet like a noose, tightening slowly around the neck. The first fragments burn in re-entry, streaking across the heavens as if the stars themselves are dying. At first, some citizens dare to believe these are simply meteors, a natural event twisted by fear into something more. But the illusion does not last, for meteors do not howl. They do not split mid-descent into clusters that writhe and change shape as they fall. When the first pod breaks the sound barrier and crashes into the soil, the earth shakes as though the planet itself recoils. A crater blossoms where once stood a field, and the husk of the pod splits open like a rotten fruit. From within spill creatures that scuttle on too many legs, their chitin glistening in the moonlight, their eyes black and mindless. They waste no time. They do not roar or threaten. They begin to burrow, gnawing at the ground, preparing the world itself for the harvest to come. In the cities, alarms blare. Sirens wail across hablocks, summoning citizens to their assigned shelters. The Imperial Guard rallies to their defensive positions, lasguns charged and tanks roused from their armored dormancy. Commanders bark orders into voxcasters that crackle with static, their voices brittle against the enormity of what approaches. And above them all, the ecclesiarchy raises their voices in prayer, bellowing litanies meant to drown out the fear clawing at every heart. For a time, these rituals hold the line of human spirit. But faith alone cannot silence the whispers of the hive mind. Even those who have never known the touch of psychic thought begin to feel its pressure. A heaviness behind the eyes, a crawling sensation along the spine. Men swear they hear their own names whispered in voices not their own. Women clutch their children, sensing a hunger that stares at them through the very walls. It is not invasion alone they face, but intrusion. A psychic tide erasing the boundary between thought and predator. The guard fires the first shots. A squadron of lemon rust tanks, engines growling like beasts in chains, unleashes its fury against a cluster of descending spores. Their battle cannons roar, shattering the night with blossoms of fire, and for a moment it seems the defenders might hold. Pods burst mid-air, raining acid and ichor across the burning plains. Yet for each spore destroyed, 10 more breach the sky. The storm cannot be stopped. Soon the surface quakes beneath the rhythm of countless impacts. Entire forests vanish beneath writhing tangles of alien growth, as Tyranid organisms flood outward in waves. Some are gaunt and swift, nothing more than claws and hunger given form. Others tower like living engines of war, their carapaces gleaming with bioweaponry that belches death with every stride. The land itself begins to warp, reshaped by alien will, as if the soil obeys the swarm more than the world it once belonged to. In the capital, the sky glows as orbital defense platforms finally open fire. Great lances of energy stab into the void, striking the nearest bioships. The stars flare with detonations, and for a heartbeat, the night is filled with triumph. Yet no cry of victory comes, for the platforms continue to fire, and still the shadows above do not break. What falls in flaming ruin is but the smallest fragment of what waits beyond sight. A dozen ships destroyed, perhaps, in a swarm that numbers in the hundreds. The swarm is endless, and its patience is infinite. Those who glimpse the bioships through telescopic lenses never forget what they see. They do not resemble vessels of steel and rivet, but vast, grotesque leviathans, their surfaces alive with pulsating sacs and twitching spines. Their mouths gape wide as they release further waves of spores, their bodies flexing against the void like predators circling prey. To look upon them too long is to feel hope wither, for they are not machines to be reasoned with, not empires to be bargained with. They are hunger given flesh, and they are here. The shadow is no longer a rumor or a whisper. It is a presence, pressing down upon every soul. And as the spores tighten their grip around the world, even the bravest begin to realize the truth. This is not a war they can win. It is a feast they must endure, praying they are not the first course. The first week is remembered not in days, but in the steady drumbeat of falling spores. Each sunrise is choked by new clouds of ash, each night lit by the crimson arcs of descent. The world itself seems to groan under the weight of what is arriving. Croplands vanish beneath a creeping carpet of alien flora, its roots twisting through soil and stone with unnatural speed. What was once fertile farmland blackens into slime-choked swamps. Alive with the clicking of unseen mab, as the people cling to what structure they can. Manufactorums churn out weapons at a pace that leaves workers collapsing at their stations. The ecclesiarchy leads processions through streets already cracked by tremors, their hymns raw with desperation. The guard stands in endless drills, readying for battles they know will come. But beneath all of it lies a gnawing awareness that these efforts are not for victory. They are for delay. Every soldier understands that they are not building a defense, but riding the measure of time left to the world. In the governor's palace, the atmosphere rots into panic. Vox channels that once carried strategy degrade into accusations, pleas, and prayers. Officers demand reinforcements from Segmentum Command, knowing full well that their cries cannot pierce the psychic shroud. Adepts of the Administratum scribble evacuation orders for transports that do not exist. The highborn who once dined on silver now barricade themselves in chambers, lit only by flickering candles. Muttering litanies of protection they scarcely believe. The mask of imperial authority cracks, and behind it lies only fear. Meanwhile, on the fringes of the hablocks, survival already bends into madness. Families abandon their homes for the promise of protection within the city walls, clogging streets with endless columns of refugees. Arbits attempt to enforce order, their shock malls sparking against crowds that howl for sanctuary. Blood stains the cobbles as the desperate trample the weak. and all the while the sky glows with the fall of more pods. None notice when the first Tyranid creatures slip from the wilds and into the outskirts. Their movements as quiet as spiders weaving into the dark. The guards. First true engagement comes in the hills beyond the capital. A regiment of infantry, supported by chimeras and basilisks, establishes a line across the ridges overlooking the plains. They are brave men and women, drilled and armed, their banners snapping defiantly in the wind. For a moment, the sight inspires hope among the citizenry who watch from distant walls. Yet when the first wave comes, hope shatters. From the valley below rises a swarm beyond counting. Gaunts by the thousands scramble across the fields, their screeches blending into a single hideous roar. Behind them lumber warriors with chitin thick as tank armor, their symbiotic weapons spewing acid and spines in unrelenting volleys. The guard holds their line for hours. Lasguns blaze, artillery thunders, and the hills tremble with the fury of war. Mountains of alien corpses pile high, smoking and writhing. But the swarm does not end. For each beast slain, a dozen more emerge. Ammunition runs thin, barrels overheat, and fatigue seeps into every muscle. When the guard finally falters, it is not from cowardice. It is because no man can stand against the ocean forever. By the time night falls, the hills are silent. The banners that once snapped in defiance lie shredded, stained with ichor and ash. Chimeras smolder on broken treads, basilisks cracked open like tin shells. Of the regiment, only fragments stagger back toward the capital. Their eyes empty, their hands shaking too violently to reload. They carry no tales, no boasts of valor. Only the silence of those who have seen a truth too vast to speak. And so the first line is gone. The swarm has tested the world and found it weak. In the days to come, the pace will quicken, the pressure will rise, and the shadow will thicken until even the strongest bastions tremble. For the Tyranids are patient predators. They have landed their first claws upon the prey, and now the feast will begin in earnest. The silence that heralded their coming is broken at last, replaced by a new sound. The endless thunder of the swarm advancing. The invasion does not truly begin on the ground. It begins in the heavens. The air itself becomes a battlefield long before the first walls crumble. The spores that once seemed scattered now arrive in torrents. A rain of living fire that streaks across the sky until night and day lose all distinction. Entire continents watch as their horizons burn. Children cry that the stars are falling, and even the priests cannot find words to tell them otherwise. Each pod that slams into the surface brings forth new horrors. But the greater war unfolds higher still, where orbital defenses struggle against an enemy that cannot be measured by fleet charts or naval classifications. The bioships of the Tyranids drift in the void like colossal predators circling their prey, their hulls of flesh and chitin pulsing with obscene vitality. They release wave upon wave of smaller organisms, living projectiles that hurl themselves into the atmosphere, splitting apart to unleash spores that blossom like tumors against the stratosphere. Planetary defense batteries fire until their barrels glow white-hot. Lances of energy punch into the sky, shattering clusters of descending spores into showers of molten rain. Macro cannons thunder, their shells streaking upward with the fury of a planet refusing to die quietly. At first, the sight fills the people with hope. The heavens flare with constant detonations, as if the Emperor himself has turned his gaze upon the world. But soon the scale of the swarm becomes undeniable. For every spore burned to ash, 10 more break through. For every bioship that shudders beneath the fury of orbital fire, another 3 drift into view, their shadows blotting out whole constellations. Within the atmosphere, the very air begins to change. Spores spread their miasma, choking the skies with toxins that dim the sun and leave the land beneath in twilight haze. Birds fall dead mid-flight, their lungs filled with invisible poisons. Oceans roil as the first tendrils of alien organisms descend into the depths, twisting waters into seething cauldrons of chemical rot. The planet gasps beneath a shroud it cannot shake, a shroud woven not of clouds but of hunger incarnate. On the surface, people gather in the streets to watch. Against their will, their eyes are drawn upward, hypnotized by the spectacle of their own doom. It is not a battle as they have been taught to imagine, grand fleets clashing in formations, no banners flying in glory. It is the sky itself turning against them, the heavens raining predators. Panic spreads in waves. Crowds surge toward the bunkers promised to protect them, trampling each other in the press. Others fall to their knees, arms raised in prayer. Their voices drowned out by the thunder of impact after impact. The guard does what it can. Hydroflak tanks swivel their guns skyward, shredding the lower atmosphere with curtains of fire that carve crisscrossing scars across the heavens. Squadrons of Valkyries launch in desperate sorties, their missile pods igniting clusters of spores before they can reach the ground. For each victory, cheers erupt among the defenders, but those cheers are short. The skies remain endless, the swarm unbroken. The Hydra crews fire until their barrels warp and their crews cough blood from the strain. Yet the pods continue to fall. Even the navy above, hardened veterans avoid war, falter before the truth. Their augurs return only static, their communications collapse into fragments, and their battle lines dissolve into chaos. They fire blind into the void, striking what targets they can before the shadow severs their coordination entirely. Ships vanish without trace, their crews consumed by boarding organisms or dragged screaming into the jaws of bioships. Those who remain fight on with grim inevitability, knowing that for every salvo unleashed, the enemy grows only closer, only stronger, and then the sky itself seems to change. The blue fades into a sickly green, the clouds twist with alien spores, and the sun dims until it resembles nothing more than a dying ember. From horizon to horizon, the firmament becomes a living canopy, pulsating with drifting sacks and writhing shapes that blot out the stars. Daylight is gone, only twilight remains, eternal and suffocating. The world looks up, and it no longer belongs to them. The twilight deepens with each passing hour, and beneath its pall, the world begins to change. No longer is the invasion confined to distant skies and streaks of fire. Now the air itself becomes an enemy. Spores burst as they descend, releasing clouds of toxins that drift like fog across the plains. The first to die are the animals, their bodies littering fields and rivers in grotesque abundance. But soon, humans follow. Workers laboring in the manufactorums collapse at their stations, coughing blood as the atmosphere corrodes their lungs. Whole villages are found silent, their inhabitants lying where they fell, faces twisted in agony. The administratum declares curfews, ordering all citizens into sealed shelters, but the numbers are too vast. Hablocks overflow, their corridors choked with refugees pounding on locked blast doors. Those who cannot enter huddle beneath improvised masks, rags soaked in water or sacred oils pressed to their mouths, as if faith and desperation could ward off what science cannot. Arbites patrol the streets with shock mauls raised, striking down rioters who scream for sanctuary. Yet even their discipline begins to fray when the haze thickens and their visors fog with alien bile. The Astra Militarum stands against this storm with grim resolve. Regiments deploy in staggered formations, their orders clear: cleanse the skies. Batteries of hydroflak tanks roar day and night, filling the air with tracers that weave bright latticework against the encroaching dark. Thunderbolts launch from hidden airstrips, streaking into the heavens with missile racks primed to cut down descending pods. For a time, these efforts hold the worst at bay. Cities erupt in cheers when the skies briefly brighten with burning wreckage, when alien shapes burst apart in plumes of fire. Yet hope curdles quickly, for the swarm does not falter. The rain of pods does not lessen. The darkness thickens anew after every fleeting victory. Above the stratosphere, the Void War deteriorates further. Naval officers shout themselves hoarse as systems fail one after another. Void shields flicker. Augur arrays collapse beneath the psychic weight. And astrogators weep at their stations, unable to see even a flicker of the Astronomican's light. Fleets fire blindly into the swarm, detonating living missiles and rending apart smaller beasts, yet every victory feels hollow. Bioships advance like predators through a school of fish, swallowing whole cruisers into their cavernous maws. Boarding organisms breach hulls, flooding corridors with chittering claws and acid maws that no bulkhead can hold. Transmission after transmission is cut short by screams. For the men and women below, these failures are invisible. All they see is the transformation of their sky into a nightmare landscape. They watch the sun vanish behind a veil of alien clouds. They watch the moon turn sickly green as spores orbit like a false halo. They watch their world smothered beneath a living canopy that breathes and pulses with the rhythm of the swarm. Children press their faces to viewports, unable to look away, even as their parents drag them back in terror. Every man, woman, and child understands it now. They are sealed inside a coffin of sky. Faith falters. Priests bellow, louder than ever. Their hymns thundered from cathedral steps, until their throats bleed. But doubt spreads through their congregations. Whispers pass through the crowd's questions no one dares ask aloud. Can the Emperor even see them beneath this shroud? If his light cannot reach them, are they already forsaken? Such thoughts are heresy, but fear does not respect doctrine. Fear gnaws in silence, shaping prayers into pleas, and pleas into despair. And still, the spores fall. Each impact shakes the ground, sending tremors through foundations, and filling the air with the stink of acid and ichor. The people huddle in the dark, listening to the steady drumbeat overhead, the relentless rain of monsters. To some, it sounds like war. To others, it sounds like the tolling of a funeral bell. The ground shakes as the first great organisms land. Not spores this time, not drifting clouds or slamming pods, but colossal bodies that strike the earth with seismic force. Each impact cracks roads, topples walls, and reduces hablocks to rubble. The creatures unfold from their shells, towering silhouettes bristling with claws, tendrils, and chitin plates that glisten with alien slime. Their shrieks echo through the valleys, drowning out the cries of the dying. Soldiers fire volleys of LAs and autocannon into their hides, but even sustained barrages only wound. Every second of resistance costs another platoon their lives, in the manufactorums. Production continues, despite the chaos. Orders barked down from the Munitorum demand round-the-clock output of ammunition, ration packs, and armor plates. Servitors collapse from overuse, their flesh machine bodies burned out by ceaseless labor. Tech priests chant binary prayers as they reroute power through failing conduits. Their mechadendrites snapping sparks across control panels. But the deeper truth is clear to all who labor there. Nothing they build will ever be enough. Against such hunger, no stockpile endures. Cities attempt to erect defenses. Walls reinforced with adamantium. Trench lines dug through avenues. Great promethium reservoirs prepared to ignite entire districts in flame if the Tyranids breach the outer cordons. The local planetary defense force swears oaths of fealty and holds fast behind their fortifications. But morale is brittle. Each day the sky bleeds with new shadows. Each night the distant horizon glows with burning settlements. The defenders watch, waiting for their own turn, knowing it will come. In the underhives, desperation becomes law. Entire populations vanish overnight, swallowed not only by the swarm but by their fellow man. Cannibal gangs roam the lightless corridors, masked and painted in blood, preying on the weak who could not secure a place in the upper tiers. Children disappear in the dark, their screams muffled by the echo of riots above. The Arbites, who descend to enforce order, rarely return, their armor left stripped and displayed on spikes as warnings. It is said that the swarm has not yet reached those depths, but already the underhive feels consumed. The ecclesiarchy declares new rituals to quell unrest. Every morning, citizens are ordered to gather at shrines and repeat a litany of endurance. Those who falter, those who hesitate or remain in their quarters, are dragged into the streets and executed as faithless. Their bodies are left where they fall, reminders of the cost of weakness. The priests thunder that this suffering is holy, that the Emperor tests his children through fire and shadow, and that to endure is to triumph. But in whispered corners, the faithful wonder if these executions are born of devotion or fear. Above the turmoil, the hive spires loom silent. Governors, nobles, and administratum officials retreat into bunkers layered with void-hardened plating. They assure the population that the Imperium will endure, that reinforcements are already en route, that the Navy still fights valiantly in the void. Few believe them anymore. Rumors spread that astropathic choirs have fallen silent, their minds burned out by the psychic storm that heralds the swarm. Some claim to have seen choirs of black-robed psychers carried out beneath sheets, their mouths twisted in perpetual screams. If no message can pierce the storm, then no aid can come, and still, the sky churns. What once was a canvas of stars becomes a single, unbroken organism. The clouds no longer shift with natural winds but pulse like lungs. The faint light of the sun is filtered through membranes and mucus veils, until all beneath walk in perpetual dusk. It is as though the planet has been swallowed whole, not by fire, but by the smothering embrace of something alive and endless. The people begin to dream strange dreams. In their sleep, they hear the sound of wings, the rustling of countless limbs moving in unison. They wake with the taste of ash in their mouths, their hearts hammering with dread they cannot explain. Some claim to hear voices, whispers carried on the wind that speak of hunger, of inevitable consumption, of a will vast beyond comprehension. When these dreamers are questioned, they cannot repeat the words, only the sensation, as if something ancient had noticed them. In time, the populace stops looking up at all. Children are taught never to gaze at the sky. Adults bow their heads as they move, eyes fixed to the ground, because to glance upward is to remember that they live beneath a ceiling of flesh. The horizon has been stolen. The heavens themselves are gone, and with them, so too fades the memory of hope. The final descent begins without fanfare. One moment, there is only the oppressive gloom of the sky creature smothering the planet. The next, the heavens split open as the swarm pours down in its fullest measure. Gargantuan creatures, some larger than hablocks, fall like living meteors, their shells slamming into the ground with detonations that rival orbital strikes. The air itself becomes hostile. Spores thicken into choking mists, drifting through the streets in suffocating lungs, corroding armor and staining every surface with a slick alien residue that glows faintly in the dark. To breathe without a rebreather is to gamble one's life. For the spores do not merely poison, they infect, rewriting flesh from the inside out. Military voxnets overload with frantic calls. Regiments report breaches, then go silent. Entire divisions vanish from the lines within hours. The swarm moves as one body, not as an army but as an instinct, a tide. Soldiers who stand their ground find themselves surrounded in moments, their firing arcs consumed by claw and fang from every direction. Yet they fight still, lasguns flashing in endless volleys, bolters roaring, artillery shaking the ground. The battlefield becomes a furnace of noise and smoke. For every Tyranid slain, 10 more emerge from the haze, climbing over the corpses of their kin with no hesitation. Civilians flee toward fortified zones, desperate to find shelter. The roads choke with traffic, endless streams of people carrying meager belongings strapped to their backs. Families are torn apart in the chaos. Children vanish in the crowds, elders stumble and are trampled underfoot. Some make it to bastions patrolled by the Astra Militarum, only to find the gates barred. The fortresses are already overfilled, ration stocks dwindling, air recyclers straining. The officers inside raise loudhailers and declare the truth. No more will be admitted. The crowds outside pound the walls, scream for mercy, pray for salvation, but the gates do not open, and so the people scatter. Some retreat into the wilderness, imagining that the swarm might not reach them. They vanish, their voices lost to the forests, now crawling with gaunts. Others return to the cities, seeking sanctuary in forgotten tunnels or derelict sublevels, unaware that the Tyranids spread downward as well as outward. Only a few are chosen by the ecclesiarchy, gathered in great chapels where sermons thunder over the din of bombardments. The priests tell them they are the chosen remnant, the survivors who will be carried to glory when the Emperor's wrath purges the Xenos. But those who remain behind at the chapel doors see only silence when the chanting stops, as if the Emperor's chosen have been swallowed whole. By now, the skies are no longer a veil. They are alive with movement. From horizon to horizon, the heavens ripple with the motion of vast appendages, feeder tendrils, and shadowed wings. Each new form blots out more light, until even dusk fades into a perpetual eclipse. The world no longer knows day or night. Time itself blurs as people stumble through unending twilight, their minds breaking under the strain. Farmers abandon their fields, manufacturums cease output, transport hubs fall silent. The planet is no longer a place of labor, and order it is a feast. Hope narrows to rumor. Some whisper that the Navy still fights above, that brave void ships hold the swarm at bay. Others mutter that the fleets were shattered long ago, that no vessel remains to carry word of their doom. In the absence of certainty, faith becomes a weapon as much as a burden. Men and women cling to their relics, rubbing smooth the aquila etched into their pendants until their fingers bleed. Yet even as they pray, the sound of claws scraping across rockcrete grows louder. The swarm is no longer distant. It has arrived. And so Chapter 2 closes not with survival, but with a silence broken only by the beat of alien wings and the shattering of doors as the Tyranids breached the last lines. A world that once looked skyward with hope now trembles beneath a canopy of hunger. The devouring has begun in earnest, and there is no turning back. The swarm has landed in full. The skies that once groaned with the weight of shadows now bleed their horrors into the streets. Every district that still stands trembles beneath the echo of battle. But it is no longer a war of armies. It is a struggle for the soul of the people. Faith, once a shield stronger than any armor, begins to falter. In the grand cathedrals that dominate the hive spires, stained glass windows shatter under concussive shockwaves, their colored fragments scattering across the marble floors like fallen stars. The sermons that once drew thousands now echo through half-empty pews, the chants of the devout growing weaker as despair gnaws at the edges of belief. For generations, the ecclesiarchy had taught that the emperor's light would never falter, that his gaze reached all worlds and guarded his children in their darkest hours. Now, beneath a sky that has been devoured, the faithful whisper doubts even as they kneel. Priests thunder against this heresy, voices hoarse from endless liturgies, demanding obedience and devotion. Some still inspire fervor, whipping congregations into fanatical ecstasy, urging them to take up weapons and throw themselves against the swarm as martyrs. Others falter mid-sermon, pausing with trembling lips as their own certainty crumbles before the enormity of what unfolds beyond their walls. The shrines that remain open become battlegrounds, not against the Tyranids, though their presence is never far but between believers and doubters. Families turn on each other in the pews, fists and blades clashing as one half clings to the emperor's salvation, and the other despairs that his silence means abandonment. The Arbites, stretched thin and exhausted from endless riots, storm the chapels to restore order, only to find themselves outnumbered by mobs who no longer fear their batons and shotguns. Many Arbites fall beneath icons torn from altars, their blood soaking into prayer rugs outside. In the underhives and forgotten habs, strange cults blossom like mold in damp stone. Whispers spread that the swarm itself is divine, that its hunger is not blind destruction but a holy judgment. Desperate men and women gather in secret chambers, carving alien shapes into their flesh, drinking the ichor of slain Tyranids, believing it grants them communion with the greater will. To the ecclesiarchy, these cults are blasphemy of the highest order, but the priests no longer have the reach to crush them. Faith splinters into shards, each one cutting deeper into the body of a dying world. Meanwhile, the Astra Militarum continues its stand, but their discipline begins to fray. Commissars execute deserters hourly, their bolt pistols booming across the trenches. Yet the flow of fleeing soldiers does not stop. Some abandon their posts and vanish into the crowds, seeking to protect families who no longer exist. Others stand in place, firing until their weapons overheat, their faces expressionless, as if they already march with the dead. The banners of regiments still fly, but their bright heraldry is tattered, stained black with spore ash and the ichor of Xeno's beasts. Among the survivors, stories circulate of visions seen in the moments before sleep, not the dreams of alien wings that plague all, but visions of golden light piercing the shadow, of a great figure striding across the battlefield, sword aflame. Some claim the Emperor himself has manifested. Others whisper that it is the final lie of a collapsing mind. These rumors ignite sparks of hope that flare brightly and vanish just as quickly, consumed by the darkness pressing on all sides. For each believer who swears they saw salvation, another spits in the dirt and declares that Terra has forgotten them. The collapse of faith is not sudden. It is a slow, unraveling, thread by thread, until the great tapestry of devotion that held the world together is reduced to frayed strands fluttering in the poisoned wind. In the absence of unity, the swarm presses harder. Every division, every fracture of trust, weakens the defense. And as cathedrals crumble and soldiers falter, the Tyranids do not rejoice, do not gloat, do not even notice. For them, there is no triumph in the collapse of faith. There is only hunger, endless and consuming. *, the avenues once filled with hymns now echo with screams. Statues of saints topple as mobs riot through the squares, their torches throwing jagged light across weathered stone. Faith that once bound neighbor to neighbor has become fuel for hatred. Some cry out that the priests lied, that the emperor's light has dimmed, that no god shields them from the shadow above. Others scream even louder, swearing that such words are treason, that the doubters must be purged before the swarm consumes them all. What began as whispered heresy erupts into open war between factions of the same broken people. Inside one shattered basilica, a scene repeats itself across the planet. Refugees huddle beneath frescoes blackened by smoke, their prayers interrupted by the thunder of gunfire outside. A preacher rises, his voice hoarse, his eyes burning with zeal. He declares that the Tyranids are a test, that every death is a sacrifice demanded by the master of mankind, that those who falter betray his eternal throne. His words ignite the crowd. Some raise weapons, others raise fists, but not all in agreement. Fists turn to blades, blades to bolters, and in the space of minutes, the holy sanctuary becomes another charnel house. When the Arbites arrive, they find only corpses sprawled before the altar, the preacher among them, his skull crushed by a censer that once swung incense through the air. Even the Arbites themselves begin to fray. Their ranks were forged for discipline, to uphold law when all else failed. But now, some Arbites strip their armor and disappear into the masses, abandoning their oaths. Others double down in brutality, executing suspects on sight, filling the gutters with blood in a desperate attempt to maintain order through terror. Yet terror cannot hold when the very foundations of belief collapse. Those who once trembled at the sight of an Arbit's shotgun now spit curses in their faces, their fear drowned by despair. And still, the ecclesiarchy fights to reclaim control. In some cities, they drag entire families to public squares, forcing them to kneel in chains. Executioners raise blades as choirs chant litanies of obedience. And the condemned are struck down one by one, their blood painting the stones as an offering of discipline. In the eyes of the priests, this is purification, a fire to burn away doubt. But the people watching no longer see purity. They see desperation, cruelty, and proof that their faith has been twisted against them. For every heretic silenced, 10 more doubts are born in the shadows. Beyond the walls, the Tyranids press harder. Each bastion that falls does not only spill blood, but also fractures spirit. Soldiers who once shouted prayers into the roar of bolters now fight in silence, their lips sealed by disbelief. Chaplains move among them, blessing their weapons and chanting promises of eternal reward. But fewer respond with the old vigor. Some avert their eyes, ashamed of their waning faith. Others meet the chaplain's gaze with open contempt, no longer willing to kneel to words they believe empty. Amid this unraveling, strange voices rise. Not the sanctioned priests or the commissars, but wandering prophets who claim visions of what is to come. One declares that the emperor has turned his gaze from them, leaving only the swarm as their true destiny. Another claims that if they abandon resistance and lay down arms, the Tyranids will pass them by like a plague that spares the meek. Crowds gather around these false shepherds, torn between desperation for any hope and fury at the blasphemy spilling from their lips. More than once, these prophets are torn apart by the very mobs they sought to lead, their screams joining the endless litany of despair. The collapse of faith is no longer a metaphor. It is stone and mortar, smoke and blood. Cathedrals burn, their spires collapsing into the streets below. Icons of the Aquila are defaced, melted down for scrap, or shattered into dust beneath boots. The sight of such sacrilege would once have driven billions to madness, but now it passes almost without notice. The people are too tired, too broken, too consumed by survival to care. Faith has not only faltered, it has been devoured, piece by piece, until only hollow echoes remain. The front lines buckle under the swarm's endless weight, and with every collapse, a new wave of despair crashes across the population. In the trenches, soldiers stand waist-deep in mud, laced with alien ichor, their eyes sunken from lack of sleep. The endless sermons once broadcast through the Vox are now silent. The ecclesiarchy's transmitters have been torn down, sabotaged, or consumed in the fighting. In their place, only static hisses, punctuated by the distant shriek of Tyranid organisms or the thunder of collapsing bastions. Even the machinery of faith has gone quiet. Some units still fight with fanatic zeal. But their fervor is less a beacon of hope than a death spiral. Whole regiments charge the enemy lines, chanting hymns at the top of their lungs, only to vanish beneath a living tide of claws and fangs. Their voices are cut off mid-prayer, their banners dragged into the muck and shredded. Those who watch from a distance do not feel inspired. They feel horror, as if witnessing the last convulsions of a dying faith. Its blood spilling across the battlefield. Among the civilians, silence spreads more insidiously than chaos. In the refugee camps that cling to the edges of ruined cities, people no longer speak of salvation. They sit in huddled clusters, their faces blank, their eyes vacant, as though words themselves have lost meaning. A mother rocks an empty bundle in her arms, her child long gone, yet no one dares disturb her delusion. An old man mutters prayers that no one answers. The hush that falls over these camps is not paced, is the quiet of resignation. A mass acceptance that nothing lies ahead but the maw. Yet there are still those who cling, not to hope, but to ritual. In secret chambers deep within the hives, groups gather by candlelight, their faces gaunt, their voices trembling as they whisper the litanies they once sang proudly in great choirs. They dare not let the Arbites hear, nor the mobs who now call faith a lie, but they persist in their clandestine devotions. Their prayers no longer ring with certainty. They are frail, cracked, like glass, ready to shatter. Still they kneel, still they whisper, because to abandon the words entirely would mean surrendering the last piece of their humanity. Others turn their faith into vengeance. Bands of zealots prowl the ruins, dragging suspected heretics into the streets, branding them with the Aquila seared into their flesh. They shout that loyalty must be proven in blood, that sacrifice alone will draw the emperor's gaze back to them. These purges spiral out of control, whole districts set aflame not by the swarm but by human hands. The Tyranids, ever hungering, arrive to find only corpses and smoke, their feast already prepared by the very people who sought salvation. Amid the chaos, one undeniable truth begins to spread. The emperor does not answer. The choirs cry out with their minds and are consumed by silence. The priests chant until their throats bleed, and no miracles follow. The faithful die alongside the faithless, their blood indistinguishable upon the stones. This revelation does not come in a single moment. It seeps through the cracks, seeps into the marrow, until even the most devoted feel its weight pressing down upon them. Some collapse beneath it, their minds shattering into madness. Others grit their teeth and fight on, not for belief, but out of sheer defiance, as if to spit in the face of the galaxy itself. And so, the collapse of faith becomes complete, not because every shrine has fallen, not because every priest lies dead, but because the people themselves have stopped looking upward. The heavens offer no answers, only the endless shadow of the swarm. Where once their eyes lifted to the stars in reverence, now they remain fixed on the ground, on the claws at their feet, on the moment-to-moment struggle to survive. The emperor, whether real or imagined, has become a silence they can no longer afford to acknowledge. The silence of abandoned faith spreads like a contagion. In the hive spires, once lavish chapels now stand hollow, their altars stripped bare, candles burned to stubs. Where choirs once raised their voices in thunderous hymns, only the faint scratching of vermin can be heard, gnawing through the wooden pews. Dust settles upon the Aquila, etched in stone, unpolished, unguarded, its wings heavy with neglect. A century of devotion has dissolved in weeks, undone not by heresy but by despair. On the streets below, survival has replaced sanctity. The starving trade relics once deemed priceless the bones of saints. Shards of icons, gilded rosaries for stale ration bars, or half-empty water flasks. Faith is no longer currency. Food is, shelter is, anything tangible, anything that promises one more day of life, is worth more than the promise of eternity. Priests who still try to preach are heckled, shoved aside, sometimes beaten. Their vestments are torn from their bodies and stripped for cloth, their reliquaries broken apart for the faint glimmer of precious metal within. Every sermon dies on the lips of the speaker, drowned out by the growl of empty stomachs and the gnawing truth that prayers cannot fill them. And yet, paradoxically, in the darkest hollows of the underhive, faith does not vanish, mutates. Strange sects kneel, not before the emperor, but before alien idols carved from Tyranid bone. They daub their bodies with ichor, whispering that to embrace the swarm is to be spared its hunger. Their gatherings echo with fevered chants, a grotesque parody of the once holy liturgies. To the ecclesiarchy, these cults are blasphemy incarnate, but the ecclesiarchy no longer has the power to strike them down. The priests who descend into those depths seldom return, and those who do are broken, their tongues split with alien sigils, their eyes wide with terror at what they have seen. The Astra Militarum fights still, but even among them, faith unravels. Where once regiments marched into battle carrying reliquaries and banners stitched with holy scripture, now their standards droop, spattered with mud and ichor, symbols of loyalty reduced to rags. Commissars continue their grim duty, executing deserters in the name of discipline. But their words no longer carry the weight of belief. Soldiers obey from fear alone, not conviction. And when fear fades, as it does for those who have nothing left to lose, discipline shatters. Some regiments fight like ghosts, going through the motions of war without fire in their hearts, their volleys mechanical, their charge joyless. They kill, they die, but their souls are already surrendered, and in the vacuum of belief, madness festers. Reports speak of entire squads turning their weapons on themselves, rather than face another night under the swarm-darkened sky. Others vanish into the wastelands, discarding their armor and lasguns, walking barefoot until the Tyranids find them. For these hollow men and women, death is not defeat, but release. Their bodies feed the swarm, but their spirits are too broken for the enemy to even notice. The collapse of faith leaves more than ruins, it leaves questions. If the Emperor is silent, if prayers cannot pierce the veil of the warp, then what remains of humanity's soul? Is survival enough when belief has rotted away? In the quiet between bombardments, these questions linger, heavier than any cannon shell, sharper than any claw. And though no answer comes, the people still ask. Because to stop asking is to admit the truth. They are alone. And so the third chapter of this tragedy ends as it must not, with fire, nor with victory, but with absence. The Emperor's name, once shouted across every battlefield, now fades into murmurs, or is forgotten altogether. Faith has not been broken in a single blow. It has been starved, smothered, eroded, until only silence remains. And into that silence, the swarm presses closer, its claws scraping against the walls of the last bastions. The people no longer pray, they simply wait. The fall of faith leaves behind a vacuum, and in Warhammer 40K, nothing stays empty for long. Into that hollow silence creep the whispers, soft at first, almost indistinguishable from one's own thoughts, but persistent. They echo in the dark corners of the mind, in sleepless nights and fevered dreams. The warp hungers for moments like this, for worlds stripped of conviction, for souls adrift without anchor. In the underhive, the whispers are the loudest. Men and women stumbling through sewage-choked corridors begin to hear voices promising relief, strength, or vengeance. A mother clutching her dying child swears she hears a kind voice assuring her the suffering can end. A starving gang leader hears laughter, urging him to take, to kill, to consume. And when they obey, the whispers grow louder, clearer, shaping themselves into commands. The warp has no single tongue, but its speech is universal in its temptation. It offers what the Emperor has withheld: answers, comfort, meaning. Some hear it as the soothing voice of a parent, others as the cruel bark of a commander, still others as an intoxicating song. It molds itself to each soul, speaking in the form most irresistible, and once invited in, it never leaves. The first to succumb are the desperate. They carve symbols into their skin, symbols they cannot possibly understand but which burn with unnatural resonance. They mutter prayers not to the throne but to unseen entities whose names slip like oil through the mind. Where once there were makeshift shrines to the Emperor, now appear crude altars fashioned of bone and rusted metal, slick with offerings of blood. The ecclesiarchy tries to resist, but their own priests falter. The whispers prey upon their doubts most cruelly, for who feels the silence of the Emperor more keenly than his servants? A confessor who has preached for 50 years finds himself awoken by a voice in the dark, not berating him for weakness, but praising him, assuring him that his flock can still be saved if only he swears himself to another master. Some resist for days, others for hours. All eventually fall. The guard notices too late. By the time commissars arrive to execute the corrupted, the infection of thought has already spread. Regiments stationed in the Underhive begin fracturing. Not from cowardice, but from conviction in powers greater than the Imperium. Some fight harder than ever, screaming praises to names they barely know, their lasguns blazing with unholy fervor. Others kneel in the midst of battle, welcoming the claws of the Tyranids as gifts from dark gods. Discipline collapses not from fear, but from faith redirected. And above all this chaos, the warp itself grows restless. The air shimmers. Shadows stretch too long, clinging to walls like living things. Candles burn with green fire. Children speak in voices not their own, uttering secrets they should not know. Warp storms flicker at the edge of the system, thin veils of unreality threatening to split wide and swallow entire fleets. Astropaths scream in unison, clawing out their own eyes to silence the visions flooding their minds. The whispers feed on despair. And despair has become endless. Every prayer, unspoken, every faith abandoned, becomes fuel. The warp swells with it, until the veil between realities thins. Soon, the voices will not only whisper, they will roar. But it is not only chaos that stirs. In the sea of madness, there are rarer voices, quiet, fleeting, almost drowned out by the cacophony. Some psychers claim to hear a distant thunder, a heartbeat, as if something vast and golden struggles to be heard. They say it is the Emperor himself, his voice buried beneath the howling gale of chaos, reaching out to those few who still cling to him. But these visions are fragile, fading quickly, swept away by the laughter of the dark gods. For every soul who claims to hear the Emperor, 100 more hear only the warp. Thus begins the 4th chapter of this tale, the rise of whispers, the colonization of minds, the slow drowning of reason beneath the tide of promises and lies. The war for this world is no longer only physical. It is fought within the mind, the spirit, the very soul of humanity. And in that battlefield, the warp has every advantage. Asterisk at first. The whispers were nothing more than voices in the dark, intangible and fleeting. But in time, they learned to shape flesh. The warp is never content to remain only sound. It yearns for incarnation, for substance, for the chance to carve its laughter into reality itself. The first signs are subtle. A child wakes screaming, his eyes burning with unnatural color, irises shifting like oil on water. A worker in the manufactorum begins to sweat rivulets of black ichor that smell of incense and rot. A preacher coughs up his own tongue, only for a new one, forked and glistening, to push its way free. The whispers do not stop at words. They demand sacrifice of flesh, warping those who yield into something both less and more than human. In the Underhive, the cults swell. Where once there were starving gangs, there are now congregations. Their leaders, marked with mutations, stand as prophets of corruption. A man with too many eyes can see through walls. A woman whose voice fractures into harmonics can shatter bone with a scream. They are heralds of powers unseen, and their followers worship them with trembling devotion. And then come the rituals. Altars built of corpses, and machine parts rise in the dark. Flames burn without fuel, casting light that feels more like shadow. The air itself grows heavy, as though pressing down on the lungs of those who dare approach. Every ritual is a signal, a flare fired into the depths of the and the warp, ever hungry, answers. The guard attempts to purge these gatherings, sending squads of skittery and hardened troopers into the tunnels. But the cults do not scatter like common rabble. They meet the Imperial advance with wild ecstasy, charging into lost fire with no thought of survival. Their blood becomes paint for symbols on the walls. Their dying screams twist into chants. The guardsmen find themselves battling not merely foes, but worshippers who fight not for life, but for the privilege of dying in the name of their gods. And behind every fallen cultist, more rise from the shadows. Some commissars order orbital bombardments, but precision is impossible. Too many hives, too many nests, too many tunnels riddling the world like veins. To cleanse them all would mean annihilating the entire planet. And the High Lords of Terra do not declare such exterminators lightly, not while the Tyranids still swarm overhead. Thus the war in the shadows festers, unresolved, unwinnable. The corruption begins to spill upward. Administratum scribes abandon their ledgers, carving heretical marks into data slates with their own blood. Medicae staff whisper lullabies in voices not their own, soothing patients into eternal sleep. Arbite's precincts find their own officers turning guns inward, slaughtering comrades before falling to their knees in prayer to things without names. The rot does not stay confined to the depths. It rises, slow but certain, toward the very spires meant to be bastions of imperial order. And with every act of devotion, the warp presses closer. Sometimes it is only a flicker in the corner of the eye, a shadow where no light falls. Other times it is unmistakable creatures of smoke and claw slipping through the veil for moments at a time, rending flesh before fading again. Psychers collapse, foaming at the mouth, their bodies convulsing as alien syllables burst from their lips. A storm is building, a gathering of power that strains against the thinning barrier between worlds. But perhaps the most terrifying change is not in the cults or the mutations, is in the ordinary people. Neighbors who were once cautious, silent, fearful, begin to smile. They begin to look at one another with a new kind of trust, a dark communion. They share whispered prayers, gestures of allegiance, offerings of food and blood. It spreads like contagion, a faith more contagious than disease. And once the whispers bind them together, they cannot be broken apart. The warp does not always arrive with claws and fire. Sometimes it seeps in quietly, binding communities with lies sweet enough to taste like truth. And as the hives rot from the inside, as soldiers lose faith and priests lose themselves, the world edges closer to collapse. The Tyranids circle above, patient and voracious, while below, chaos digs its roots deeper with every passing hour. Soon, the whispers will not remain whispers. They will take shape, clawing their way into full reality, demanding not only prayers, but dominion. The storm gathers, the veil strains, and the question becomes not whether this world will fall but to which master it will be offered first. The whispers have always been patient, but patience has limits. At last, they surge from shadows into fire. The cults no longer gather in secret. They proclaim themselves with banners painted in blood, their symbols daubed across hive walls, where once the Imperial Aquila stood proud. Vox channels erupt with heretical sermons, voices layered and distorted, as if 1,000 throats speak through one mouth. The rebellion is no longer hidden, it is declared. It begins with sabotage. Manufactorums fall silent, their engines clogged with gore and rust. Power grids fail as workers offer their stations as sacrifices, plunging entire districts into choking dark. Munitorum storehouses burn, their munitions looted by zealots whose faith now fuels a holy war against the Imperium itself. At first, commanders believe it to be the work of desperate rioters, but then the truth spreads like wildfire. These are no starving masses. These are believers. They fight not for bread, but for devotion, their chants rising above the roar of last-dash fire. And then, the veiled tears dot in the midst of one uprising, as guardsmen force their way into a cult stronghold. The air splits with a shriek that is not sound but sensation. Flesh sloughs from bone. Vox units rupture in bursts of static. For a heartbeat, reality quivers. Then something steps through. A shape, impossibly tall. Its body both solid and shifting. Eyes burning with the light of distant stars. Its clawed hands drip with flame that does not burn, but consumes all hope. The guardsmen break before it even moves, their training no match for the sheer psychic weight pressing into their skulls. A commissar fires bolt rounds point blank, and the creature laughs, not in sound but in thought. As the bolts detonate harmlessly within its form, it swipes once, and a squad vanishes in a spray of vaporized flesh. The cultists fall to their knees in ecstasy, their faith made manifest. Demons are no longer legend, whispered in Schola classrooms. They are here. And once one breaches the veil, more follow. Across the hive, pockets of unreality bloom like sores. A hablock folds inward, its walls bending as though the structure itself breathes. From within spill figures of smoke and iron, fanged mouths shrieking in joy. A market square becomes a killing ground, as a tide of lesser entities tears apart merchants and customers alike, their laughter mixing with the sound of rending bone. The Imperial response is brutal, but insufficient. Psyker detachments are unleashed, sanctioned witches standing shoulder to shoulder with sisters of battle, their chants of exorcism meeting the howls of the warp. For every demon banished, 2 more claw their way through, birthed from the collective terror of the hive. The Emperor's name is shouted across battlefields, his image raised high in defiance. But even faith feels fragile beneath the storm of unreality. The cults spread like fire, their leaders transformed into prophets of the damned. Some sprout wings of sinew and ash, soaring above battle as living icons of their patron gods. Others swell with unnatural growths, their swollen bodies bursting with larvae that scatter and consume all in their path. Their followers, drunk on devotion, hurl themselves against guard lines, knowing that death is not an ending but a gateway. And still, the whispers persist. Even amid roaring demons and blazing heresy, they never stop speaking. They tell soldiers to lay down arms, promising safety and surrender. They urge priests to embrace truth, mocking their prayers to the emperor. They weave doubt into every thought, every hesitation, every moment of silence. And those who falter, even for a heartbeat, find themselves overwhelmed, their voices added to the chorus of madness. As the rebellion escalates, command breaks down. Vox orders are drowned out by interference, astropaths fall silent, and orbital fleets receive only fragmented pleas. Civilians fleeing from the carnage clog the upper levels, only to find doors barred and bastions sealed by fearful nobles, unwilling to let the corruption touch their spires. Refuge becomes prison, and prisons become slaughterhouses, as the whispers turn fear into riot, and riot into massacre. The war has changed. It is no longer a struggle between men and Xenos, between Tyranid, swarm, and human defiance. It is a battle for reality itself, for the soul of an entire world. The Tyranids wait above, hungering, patient, their shadow across the warp masking the truth of what unfolds. But chaos has no patience. Chaos burns now, consumes now, and its fire spreads unchecked. The whispers, once only murmurs in the dark, now resound as a chorus of shrieks and hymns. Their echoes shake the hive, filling every street, every hab, every heart. Humanity teeters on the edge, pulled between two devourers, one of flesh, the other of soul. And as the veil thins further, one cannot help but wonder, has this world already been lost? The warp does not invade gently. Once the breach is opened, it hungers, devours, and expands until nothing untouched remains. What began as flickers of unreality now stretches across entire districts, vast wounds in the fabric of the hive. Streets dissolve into rivers of molten shadow. Buildings twist into grotesque parodies of cathedrals, their spires bending to form the sigils of dark gods. Even the air itself changes, thick with the scent of burning copper and the taste of ash upon the tongue. Reality shudders as though caught in the hands of something vast and cruel, being kneaded into shapes not meant for mortal eyes. Possession spreads like plague. Entire work crews are overtaken at once, their eyes rolling white as alien voices speak through their mouths in unison. Families are transformed before each other's eyes. Fathers growing horns that crack their skulls. Daughters sprouting claws, mothers splitting open with wings of raw sinew. These are not transformations chosen, but inflicted, the whispers seizing flesh as casually as one might claim a tool. Resistance is meaningless. Once the soul is marked, the body follows. The Imperial Guard does what it can. But lines fracture under the weight of unreality. Vox commands vanish in storms of static, orders lost as soldiers face enemies that cannot be killed in any conventional sense. Bolts explode inside demonic flesh, only for the wounds to reseal, laughter spilling from the rents. Lost fire burns holes through bodies that collapse into smoke, only to reform in the midst of Imperial ranks. Grenades detonate to no effect as demons surge forward, their forms shifting with each heartbeat. A nightmare unbound by physics. It is the Sisters of Battle who hold longest, their hymns of fire and devotion carrying even in the heart of the storm. They burn shrines raised to chaos, sanctify ground with flame and prayer, and for a time, their faith pushes back the tide. But even they cannot stand forever. When a cathedral itself twists inward, its altar warping into a gaping maw, entire orders vanish into its depths. Still, they fight, their screams of liturgy echoing until swallowed by the dark. The higher tiers of the hive, once distant from the suffering below, now feel the touch of the warp. Nobles lock their gates, sealing spires, in futile attempts to ward off corruption. But the whispers seep through steel and ceramite alike. Servants turn on masters, assassins strike in the name of gods never named in Imperial creed. and once proud palaces erupt with laughter, not of this world. The corruption respects no station. It devours from the underhive to the highest spire alike. The planet's command structure falters. Governors issue decrees that never reach their recipients. Regimental leaders vanish in the night, replaced by doubles, whose eyes glow faintly with warplight. Some warlords, desperate to hold order, turn their fury on their own soldiers, executing thousands in hopes of stemming heresy. But fear does not kill whispers. It feeds them. Each execution, each desperate act of repression, only drives more souls into the arms of chaos. And above it all, the warp storm grows. Astropaths weep blood, screaming visions of impossible futures. Some claim to see the entire planet folding inward like paper, vanishing into a single tear that leads nowhere. Others describe a chorus of demonic laughter echoing across eternity, a song that will never end. The fleet in orbit reports malfunctions. Machine spirits screaming as systems short and navigators clutch their heads, driven mad by visions of infinite hunger. The planet is no longer merely under siege, is becoming a beacon, a wound in reality calling to every predator in the void. Within this madness, the ordinary people are forgotten. Civilians huddle in the ruins of hablocks, clutching icons of the Emperor until their fingers bleed. Some still believe salvation will come, that the Imperium will not abandon them. Others know the truth already. They see the demons rising, the guard breaking, the sky dark with alien shadow. They know no rescue can come fast enough. And in that hopelessness, the whispers grow louder still. There are only two paths left: to burn the world, purging every soul in fire, or to let it fester until it becomes another demon world, lost forever to the Imperium. Both choices are ruin. Both choices are death. But one at least offers silence. The other promises only eternal screaming. The call for exterminatus is never given lightly. It is a sentence pronounced not upon soldiers or traitors, but upon an entire world, every soul, every life, guilty or innocent alike. Yet on this world, the whispers leave no other choice. Already the hives scream with demons, cults rise in endless numbers, and the veil is torn so wide that the very stars flicker above, as if reality itself were growing weary. The Lord Governor's astropathic, please reach orbit only in fragments. Distorted by the warp storm now blossoming like a wound in the system's heart. Naval captains convene in silence, weighing the horror of the order they must give. Some argue to wait, to send more regiments, to salvage what remains of the population. Others whisper of the Tyranids, circling above, their shadow pressing close. If the swarm consumes this planet, they will devour not just flesh, but warp-born corruption as well. What monstrosity would rise from such a union no one dares imagine. Commissars in high command on the surface know the truth even before the fleet decides. They have seen the failure firsthand. They have watched Losbolts pass through demons as if through smoke. Have seen entire regiments turn from loyal guardsmen to chanting heretics in a single night. They know there is no victory, here only delay. And every moment of delay feeds the whispers further, in the spires. Noble families beg for evacuation, offering their wealth, their ships, their allegiance. They are met with silence. Their pleas fall into the static of vox channels drowned by warp interference. In the underhive, desperate prayers to the Emperor turn to ash as demons tear open the walls of shrines. Still, some cling to faith, screaming his name into the storm, refusing the whispers even as their flesh is shredded by talons. For a moment, their cries shine like sparks in the dark. But sparks cannot stop a wildfire. The Tyranids circle closer. Their spores drift in orbit, blotting out stars. The fleet watches both horrors, the alien swarm and the demonic corruption, wondering which will strike first. There is bitter irony in their patience. The great devourer needs only time. It waits for the Imperium to falter, for the warp to claim what it can, before sweeping in to consume the rest. Above and below, the jaws of damnation close together. And yet, even as exterminatus is prepared, the whispers do not fall silent. They reach into the minds of captains in orbit, offering visions of glory if they only lower their weapons. They tempt gunnery crews with promises that the Emperor does not need this sacrifice, that there is still another way. Some crewmen hesitate, hands trembling over fire controls, until their commissars put bolter rounds through their skulls. It is not only the world that must be purged, it is the weakness of men. The rituals below reach a fever pitch. In the heart of the largest hive, cultists raise a cathedral of living flesh. Walls pulsing with veins, spires dripping with blood. Their chants summon something vast, something that strains even the swollen veil. The demons already here fall silent, kneeling as if awaiting their master. The air grows heavy, each breath burning in the lungs as the cult's prayer rises. The warp itself seems to bend, preparing to disgorge something far greater than all that has come before. It is then that the order is given, a single word, whispered into command relays, yet thunderous in its consequence. The fleet's guns awaken. Torpedoes armed with cyclonic warheads are prepared, their machine spirits keening, as if in dread of their own duty. Every crewman knows what it means. Every guardsman on the surface feels the shift in the air. The silent recognition that their lives are no longer theirs to fight for. The planet is already dead. Soon it will simply be ash. Still, the whispers persist to the very last. They promise the flames will not end suffering, that the warp will endure, that even death cannot silence them. And in truth, they may be right. For in Warhammer 40K, there is never true silence, only the echoes of screams. Carried on the tides of eternity. The world burns. The demons shriek as they are torn back into the image. The cults laugh until they are ash. The Tyranids circle away, cheated of their prey, hungering for the next. The fleet records a barren ruin where once a proud world stood. Nothing remains but silence, cold and final. Or so the Imperium hopes. When a world dies, it does not vanish quietly. Its death ripples outward, through the warp and through memory, echoing across the Imperium like a tolling bell. The exterminatus of a planet is not just destruction, it is an ending carved into the annals of history. Whispered about 4 generations as both warning and lament. And this world, consumed first by Tyranids, then corrupted by chaos, and finally silenced by imperial fire. It becomes a story far larger than its ashes. In the halls of the Administratum, clerks scratch the planet's name from records, replacing it with a designation of ruin. To them, it is another lost entry in endless ledgers. One world among thousands extinguished in the Imperium's eternal struggle. They do not feel the screams of its people. They do not smell the burning of its hives. To the scribes of Terra, loss is ink on parchment, nothing more. But the echoes reach beyond parchment. They seep into the fabric of humanity itself. For the survivors who escaped before the veil fully closed, the memories are poison. Refugees tell conflicting tales. Some insist the Emperor's light abandoned them. Others claim they saw him in the last moment, a golden flare piercing through demonic storm. Children who escape the fire grow into adults, haunted by nightmares, hearing whispers in their dreams as if fragments of the warp clung to them. They are shunned, distrusted, called tainted, even when unmarked. For how can anyone truly flee a world devoured by chaos? In the ecclesiarchy, the planet becomes a parable. Preachers thunder from pulpits that the Emperor's justice is absolute, that those who falter in faith will meet the same fate. They do not mention the desperation of starving civilians, or the silence of unanswered prayers. Instead, they paint the destruction as holy necessity, a lesson to steel the faithful against whispers in their own hearts. And yet, in quieter corners, some priests doubt. They ask in hushed voices, why the Emperor allowed such ruin? Why his silence lingered while demons feasted? Such questions are dangerous, but they spread nonetheless, like embers smoldering in the dark. The Astra Militarum records the campaign as failure. Regiments are marked with dishonor, their banners blackened, their names struck from glory rolls. Soldiers who fought there, if they lived, bear scars invisible as well as physical. Some refuse to speak of what they saw, their minds broken by the sight of demons clawing through reality. Others become zealots, louder in their praise of the Emperor than ever before, their faith forged in fire and fear. And some simply vanish, deserting into the stars, unable to serve under banners that ordered them to die for nothing. Among the Inquisition, whispers of the event spread with more weight. Some ordos argue the Tyranids are more dangerous for what they might become, if ever they feed on corrupted flesh. Others see the warp incursion as proof of weakness in imperial faith, demanding harsher measures across countless worlds. For them, the planet is not a tragedy, but a precedent. If faith falters, If whispers are given quarter, fire must be the answer. Fire before corruption spreads. Fire before another wound opens in the galaxy's fragile skin. But the warp itself does not forget. The demons torn back into immaterial depths remember the taste of the world, the ecstasy of their brief incarnation. They hunger for it, and their laughter lingers in the immaterium like scars across a wound that will never fully heal. Navigators traveling near the ruined system report shadows at the edges of their vision, voices scratching at the walls of their minds. The planet may be ash, but in the warp, its scream still burns. And the Tyranids, cheated of their feast, drift onward. They seek the next prey world, the next harvest. Yet in their hive mind lingers something faint, some echo of the corruption they nearly consumed. No one can say what this means, whether it will fester into something new, or simply dissolve into the endless hunger of the swarm. But in a galaxy where every shadow breeds danger, even faint echoes are enough to birth dread. Thus the world dies twice, once in fire, and again in memory. The Imperium writes it off as necessity. The ecclesiarchy twists it into scripture. The Inquisition folds it into calculation. And ordinary souls, scattered like ash across the void, carry the wound in silence. The galaxy moves on, but the echoes remain, whispering still, refusing to be buried. Time moves on, as it always must, but echoes are stubborn things. They linger, clinging to the fabric of memory long after the flesh that bore them has turned to ash. The galaxy forgets many worlds, but not this one. Its death is too vast, its stories too insistent, its myth too hungry to be erased, and so it remains, not on any chart or star map, but in the minds of those who whisper when the lights burn low. Among the administratum, the name of the world is struck from all records. Entire data archives are sealed, data slates scrubbed, and astropathic transmissions purged. The act is not unusual. Countless worlds vanish from the rolls each century. Yet despite the effort, the story does not die. Redacted files breed speculation, and the absence itself becomes proof of something greater. For every attempt at silence, a dozen new rumors emerge, whispered in the quiet moments between war and duty. The Inquisition too tries to bury it. Interrogators burn heretics who spread the tale. Libraries are cleansed, pilgrims are executed in the streets. And still the myth grows stronger. In destroying every record, the Inquisition creates the illusion of forbidden knowledge, a treasure of truth hidden beneath layers of lies. And humans, as they always have, hunger most for what they are told they cannot have. Rogue traders speak of it as a cursed system, a place where fortunes are promised but never found. Some sell maps to its non-existent coordinates, charging desperate fools for a chance at relics that cannot exist. For them, the myth becomes profit, a coin minted from fear. Smugglers and voidborn captains weave the tale into warnings, painting crude glyphs on their hulls, to ward away the phantom swarm they claim still prowls the void. Even falsehoods gain weight when believed, and enough belief can bend reality itself. The ecclesiarchy, recognizing the story's power, turns it into sermon. Fire and ruin become parable, the lost billions transformed into martyrs who fell so that others might endure. Preachers thunder from cathedral pulpits that the Emperor's light burned away corruption, that the world's sacrifice is a beacon to guide humanity's faith. The faithful weep, not for the truth, but for the meaning they are told to see. And in their grief, the myth is sanctified, woven into scripture, repeated across the stars as holy example. But for others, the story is curse. In the silence of deep space, crews report ghost signals, flickers of planetary coordinates that vanish when plotted. Astropaths claim to hear faint signals, not of man, nor demon, but of something between. For them, the myth becomes terror, a haunting that clings no matter how far they flee. Some ships vanish, chasing these phantom calls. Others return with their crews broken, silent, their eyes wide as if seeing something beyond sanity's reach. In the Black Library, seers mark the tale as unresolved thread, one that will not burn away no matter how many futures they sift. For them, it is not myth, but warning. In the echo of one world's death, they sense possibility, the chance of something new born from annihilation. Whether that possibility favors chaos, the hive, or something unknown, they cannot yet see. But the shadow lingers on their charts, a reminder that even destruction can birth new fate. And so, The world endures, not in stone, nor soil, nor even ash, but in story. The hive mind does not remember, for it has no memory. The demons remember only what they wish, shaping the myth for their own hunger. But mankind remembers. Humanity cannot help but cling to stories, even when they are knives pressed against their own throats. They speak the name of the world like a curse, or a prayer, or a warning, and in speaking it, they give it life. The truth is irrelevant. Perhaps the world was simply consumed. Perhaps it was burned clean. Perhaps it never mattered at all, in the endless churn of war. But truth does not outlive myth, not in a galaxy where faith and fear have greater power than fact. The echo of the lost planet is louder than the world itself ever was, louder than its cities, its armies, or its dying screams. It will continue long after its dust has scattered, a phantom that cannot be silenced. And so it ends, not with silence, but with a whisper that stretches across the stars. A whisper that feeds the warp, haunts the void, and nests in the hearts of men. A whisper that says the galaxy itself is hungry, and that no world, no matter how guarded, is beyond its reach. The echo of a dead world is eternal, and in the darkness of the 41st millennium, eternity is enough.